Morning, everyone. Welcome to the scoreboard. How do South Africa lose knockout games? I know how most of you are going to answer this. You could be talking to me about choking, rain. But the thing that you can always trace them back to is one consistent thing: batting too slow. Temba Bavuma is going to be hearing that quite a bit in the next day or so. And let's be honest, it is very hard to choke when you take no wickets, allow a massive score, block out the power play, get hugely behind the rate, and lose wickets regularly. That is called being completely and utterly outplayed. South Africa did three things right today. They got Ngidi back in form at the right time. Henry was pretty much handled with the new ball, and they absolutely smacked the ball around at the death. None of that mattered. They were so far out of the game that none of that mattered. Kane Williamson was allowed to sleepwalk through the first part of his innings because of how poor South Africa bowled. Their other frontline bowlers were absolutely terrible. And then Bavuma decided that he was allergic to making runs. And by the time Miller got to the period that he actually wanted to smash, there was no one left to smash with. New Zealand outbowled, batted, and fielded South Africa. They were the better team in so many different metrics that we've had to invent some more just to give them credit. South Africa came third in this match. From Virat Kohli's MCG6 against Pakistan to Bumrah's stump-destroying Yorker to Ollie Pope, incredible things happen on the cricket ground. We also get iconic lines off it, like Siraj saying, "I only believe in Jesse Bye." There are so many incredible moments that cricket fans just never forget. And now you can wear them on your chest. Free Hit Gear has launched a line of amazing t-shirts and hoodie designs. Passionate fans in India can order through their website, freehitgear.com, while fans abroad can use Free Hit Gear on the Etsy store to have items delivered to them. Order now with the code GOODAREAS, or one word, to get a limited time 15% discount, and you can wear a t-shirt like this one right here. All right, let's get started. I'm probably going to start in a way that maybe not everyone would, but I think Mitch Santner is probably the difference here. And the reason is I'm not sure that New Zealand actually scored beyond par. I thought par was maybe 375, 380 on this wicket. I do think the wicket changed a little bit. So probably by the time South Africa batted on it, par was a little bit lower. So perhaps that changes the way we think about things. So within that, to be able to bowl as well as Mitch Santner did in this game, I think is huge. And this is the Dusra stats for spinners with 100 wickets. So this is adjusted for era in ODI cricket looking at bowlers. And this is so fascinating, right? You can see here, that the spinners have absolutely dominated, some, Warren, Kadir, Imran here, down here, Mujib, right? This is Vittori. This is Santner. So we talk about him as a defensive bowler. He's not really all that defensive. He's kind of in the middle of this cluster here. And he's clearly not an attacking bowler. He's not taking a lot of wickets here. But this is the fascinating thing about this area. You've got Grant Flower not that far away. For those of you who've seen Grant Flower bowl, you'll be like, oh my God. Like, that's not a good place for Mitch Santner to be. Shastri, okay, slightly better. And you got George Dockrell under here, obviously an associate bowler. This is the fascinating one, Carl Hooper. Because Carl Hooper, a bit like Mitch Santner, probably not bowled a great deal in Asian conditions throughout his career. Whereas at least Grant Flower had some in Zimbabwe. Those wickets were quite often Asia spinning friendly in Zimbabwe. Carl Hooper would have had a couple of wickets, but he actually probably played a lot of cricket also in Australia on very flat wickets because most of the West Indians were playing one-day cricket in Australia all the time back then. This is not exactly where you want him to be. And that's why I've had question marks on him before. And you look at 2017 to 2019. This is in the Champions Trophy and the World Cup. Both of these tournaments in England, of course. You can see here a little bit more economical. And I think by this stage in his career, he was getting a little bit better than before. But you're looking at a adjusted strike rate. You're looking at a raw strike rate of 72. That means he was taking less than a wicket a game in those two tournaments. coming into 2023, you see how different he's been. Now, this is in Asia. You see, his economy has come down a little bit, but he's now taking a wicket every 34 balls, almost 2 wickets a game, right? And I just want to look at this for a moment to just show how much he was struggling in this period to take wickets. And it wasn't the only one. You can see right through here in the middle, he used to take a lot of wickets all the way through his career. So this isn't just like, oh, he's played some games in Asia and he hasn't. Because you can see in the first part of his career, he was very good at taking wickets, and then it just kind of stops and he becomes completely defensive. He has one really good period in here and then gets very, very poor. And this is the 2023 World Cup. And you can see since then, he's been very good, for the majority of the time. A little bit of a spike up here. He's just become such a better bowler, Mitch Santner. And we know that because he also was always rubbish in Test cricket, and he can now bowl in Test cricket as well. Nothing but respect for someone who, really was struggling for a long period of time, was a deep bench player, right, in the IPL. With all of his skills, the ability to change pace, to move himself around on the crease, and his batting and fielding skills, he really should have been a much more successful cricketer than he has been so far. So kudos to him for just getting better and becoming the kind of player that he always should have been. I thought he was outstanding today. I do think it spun a little bit more in the second innings, which obviously helped him. It might have also been a slightly better wicket if you're a little bit taller as a spinner as well. Perhaps that was part of it. Keshav Maharaj didn't have that advantage. But when it comes down to it, I just thought Mitch Santner was absolutely fantastic on a wicket where we've had, almost 700 runs scored? A lot of runs. Let's get to the batting. So, we have made a map here of all of Rachin Ravindra's hundreds so far. So you can see we don't have any in the UK. We don't have any in South Africa. We've got none in the West Indies either. And obviously when we get to Australia, oh no, he's got none in Australia and New Zealand. Okay, well, let's just keep going. Where are all of his ODI hundreds? Oh, here they are. Now, there's 2 funny things about this. Oh my God. He's got none in Antarctica. All right, so there's 2 funny things about this. The first one is that almost all of his hundreds have come in Pakistan. The red ones are Pakistan, blue ones and the white ones are India. They're actually more separated by strike rate, but I'm just letting you know that's where they are. But he's basically made 5 ODI hundreds, and 3 of them are in the foothills of the Himalayas. Like, what the hell? Who is a Himalaya specialist? What kind of a weird batter does that make Rachin Ravindra? Absolutely love this. This is a favorite. Big fan of Varun for finding this one out and putting it together on this map. Absolute genius. Rachin Ravindra, the Himalaya specialist 50-over batter. Good on him. Now, will I actually be able to get out of this? Yeah, I can get out of it. I thought he was fantastic today. We'll come on to Kane Williamson in a little bit, but he allowed Kane Williamson to score slowly. It was really, really good. So we can see here from the 2023 World Cup is the blue line up until that point, I should say. Sorry, from that point until today. I'll get it right eventually. We can see that generally he's about a run of ball against pace, and he usually kicks off against spin. And today he kicked off against pace, and actually against spin wasn't that special. So I like this because I think it just shows you what a talented player he is. He's not as one-dimensional as we sometimes see other players. Generally, these curves for most players will be roughly in the same pattern all the way through. They might bat slightly faster or slightly slower at different times, but they're usually better against pace or better against spin. One of the reasons that he has such a high ceiling is that he is so good against both, and on different wickets at different times, he can up and slow down when he needs to. And one of the other things I really like about him, and I've spoken about this before, is just the fact that he hits boundaries to pretty much every part of the ground, right? Mid-off, really the only one he didn't go at today. And you can see there's a couple over extra cover, which is, in one-day cricket, is maybe more important. They had the mid-off up in the circle for a little while as well, so that might play a part in it. But this is a really good spread out, and he's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different single zones. Plus he can hit 4s in multiple different ways. Just such a fan. It was such a brilliant innings and really set them up so incredibly. This is his true dots and sixes. So basically, what his ratio is for each one of these different types of delivery. So on dot balls, he's 17% better than where we want him. On ones, he's 11%, and on twos and threes, he's 28%. That makes him a world-class strike rotator there. And we haven't got to the fact that he's also 28% more likely to hit fours. And considering he bats in the power play, really, really special there. And also, generally, opening batters are either very good at hitting fours, and very rarely are they good at hitting sixes. He can hit both. So he's not just chipping the ball. He's not just finding gaps. He has the ability to clear the rope. It's another reason why I like him. He's so... You look at this graphic, and you look at the graphic before, right? He's just so well-rounded. Although, if you go to the global map we showed you earlier, apparently can only make runs in one place. And this is the Zulu stats for New Zealand batters in ICC ODI tournaments. Remember, he hasn't played a lot of tournaments at the moment. But this is fascinating. Shout out to my friend Jeremy Coney. I'm going to have to be sending this through to him at one stage. Stayed in very much for a long period of time, didn't you, Jezza? But terrible strike rate. Ross Taylor. Very interesting that he's there, right? Then you've got Glenn Turner, who I think is massively underrated. Obviously, Martin Crowe. And Mark Greatbatch, 1992 World Cup. Stands, remember. And Scott Cyrus, I was quite happy with it. But this is what I really like this. This is the most fascinating thing I've ever seen. Kane Williamson, you can see, is quite defensive. He's got an adjusted Zulu of about 80. Like, he's a long way behind this area here, isn't he? I mean, like a long way back. And his average isn't quite as high as I thought. It's 52. I would have thought it would have been even more. And then you've got Rachin Ravindra from far fewer games. Basically adjusted at around 100. His numbers actually come back a little bit because he's played so much modern cricket. And he's adjusted average at 60 as well. But what I love about all this is if you combine Rachin Ravindra with Kane Williamson, you get Roger Twos. And well done for all 7 people watching this show who remember Roger Twos. But let's move on to Williamson a little bit. So we know that he's a defensive player, and that is part of the way he goes about it. This was such a slow start. He makes up for it a little bit in this period, but he really doesn't become more than a run of ball until those last, whatever it was, 60 balls, when he goes nuts. This is the thing with the catch-up batter. If he goes out anywhere around in this period, New Zealand would have been massively behind. But he did catch up, right? And it was a very, very decent knock by the end of it. But he was carried a little bit by Rachin Ravindra scoring at such a good strike rate all the way through. This is him today in the black. So we could see against pace, he was a little bit quicker than normal. But against spin, usually goes quite slow, really. It's 78 strike rate. And today he was up at 123. And it was really probably attacking the spin. As I said, I did think the pitch probably helped the spinners a little bit more later on. Like, even when South Africa were bowling slow balls towards the end of their innings, there seemed to be a little bit of grip in the surface, whereas early on, I didn't see that as much. But well done for Williamson, because this is, he saw the weakness today and he went after it, which is really, really good batting. A couple of sixes for him, and we'll show you why that's funny in a moment. You can see he doesn't have the boundary options of someone like Rachin Ravindra, but again, look at the strike rotation options. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You can almost put that one in as well, but certainly 6, 7. Very hard to keep him off strike. He's just going to find a way to get boundaries. I don't know if he can start that slow again. Like that's second innings in a row. He started really slow. One time, it helped win the game, and the other time it probably caused some issues for New Zealand. He can't keep getting stuck at the start of his innings. He's just got to find a way of rotating the strike a little bit more at the beginning. And let's look at him as a strike rotator. So I was a bit surprised at this. He's not as good a strike rotator as I thought he would be. You have a look, his dot ball percentage is marginally above par. It's still above par. And his ones is only a little bit more above par. But again, these are not elite numbers. He's brilliant at twos, though, right? And he is a very good placer of the ball, like you watch him in Test cricket or anything else. He is a very good placer of the ball. That is incredible to be 22% better at twos and threes. But remember, he probably makes less, even though he's making more than anyone else, that's still going to be a very small percentage of overall runs. We could see here, he's just behind par in terms of fours, which I was a bit surprised at. I thought he'd be a little bit further back there. And then comically, He is 54% worse at hitting sixes than what we'd expect for the balls that he's faced. That said, he hit 2 today. He's just got to stay in long enough. This is his true values by ICC tournaments. I think we can really see here, he just very rarely fails. Right? His true average is always at par or above. But he actually has had quite a few decent tournaments. You know, it's not that these numbers are exceptional. Like, the best true strike rate we have here is plus 12, which is, I think, like Virat Kohli's career record, if I remember his true values. So, you know, it's not like miles ahead, but good. Everything else, though, anything in this quadrant, you're generally a plus player. Like, and then he's had 2 other tournaments here where he's at par. And then in 2019, he ended up being quite good. What was the innings? It was the New Zealand, the India game, wasn't it? Where he made his runs? But that was probably his only bad tournament. It just shows you how consistent he has been. But not a dominant force, but an important one. And he's one of the reasons that New Zealand have punched above their weight in so many tournaments, because you have to get through Williamson. And he's probably the reason why they might struggle sometimes in the run fests. But today he caught up. And so it was a fine innings in the end. Sometimes you get stuck, though, and you don't get a chance to catch up. Like Temba Bavuma. The truth is that Temba Bavuma is actually a well above average ODI player. It's by far his best format. He's a very limited batter. He doesn't have a lot of weapons. Excuse me, got a bad cough at the moment. He doesn't have a lot of weapons, but he has a very repeatable way of batting. And I think for people with that kind of method, ODI cricket is probably their best format. And he's not very good at T20 cricket. He's just an average player in Test cricket. I think he's I think he's slightly above par in ODI cricket. But he also fits into the way that South Africa want to play very, very well. They essentially want to knock the ball around in there, especially from their top 3, sometimes even their top 4, get themselves into a position where 5, 6, 7 can come in and swing later on, especially 5 and 6. And Temba Bavuma fits that perfectly. He just got stuck. And he is a limited player, and he was going up against Henry and Jameson, who were getting the ball to move. And part of his job is to make sure that they don't lose too many wickets early on. So I understand why he batted the way he did. But sometimes you just get stuck. And unfortunately, in the history of South African cricket, if you go through this, I can't remember if Rusty's ever done this, but he might have. But Callis, Faf, Kirsten, Smith, Duminy, Cullinan. Who's this over here? Yeah, maybe you could almost put Jonty in there as well. All those guys in that middle, I reckon, have played a part in South Africa losing a knockout game or last game of qualifying by batting too slow. Sometimes it's been a combination of a couple of them together. It's just how things go, and South Africa always seem to find a way for one player just to get stuck. And you know, Rassie is, you look at this, his strike rate on the Zulu stats is almost identical to Bavuma. But he didn't get stuck today, and Bavuma absolutely did. And unfortunately, it just seems to happen every time they find one person to do this. And Bavuma will be blamed. We know why, we know politically why, and all this sort of stuff. These numbers show, this is him, and you got Faf here, you got Gary Kirsten here, and you got Graham Smith here. This is not a bad ODI player. This was a bad ODI innings. And it has probably cost them the game. It's the same thing. They basically get behind the rate, and then they try and catch up, and they just lose too many wickets. And it's a real shame, because you've got David Miller, Klusner, De Villiers, Klaassen. You get through Amler in there. There was someone else that was good up here. Rhodes and Gibbs. They've had some really interesting players over the years, all-rounders as well, like Pollock. But when it comes down to it, it just doesn't work. Let's go into Daryl Mitchell. He's been in terrible form. He came out to bat today, and I was like, oh my God, he's going to fail again. In fact, the run line for him was 30.5 runs, and I was like, well, that's a safe under. And for about 12 balls, I was like, well, there's no way he's getting over 30 here. I really like the way he came through at the end. It's taken him a while to find this form. I briefly talked about Ngidi early on. Both those guys have been in bad form, but they're not bad players, and we know that. You see here, not a very good strike rotator, although again, very good at 2s and 3s. How do you even get good 2s and 3s if you're a New Zealand player and you play half your games on tiny little grounds? So good on him for that. But he's about par with 4s, and he is 39% better when it comes to hitting 6s than what we would expect. Really good innings from him today, helped them out quite a bit. You can see he's really getting stuck quite a bit against spin of recent times. And I've talked about it a lot. I thought they made a mistake. I'll come to this in a minute, but I thought they made a mistake with the batting order again today, and I thought they made a mistake with the batting order in their last game. One game they lost, one game they won, so it didn't really matter all that much. But yeah, he got stuck against spin in this game. He got stuck against spin in a previous game, but he made up for it with the way he played at the death. I actually think right at the moment, just the way he's playing spin, him and Latham just need to swap spots. But we'll get to exactly what I mean by that in a moment. I found it very interesting today that he was it felt like he always comes down the wicket. It felt like he was going across the crease. So it's like he moved his trigger, and because of that, they bowled a little bit too straight to him at times, which just allowed him to get off strike. And then we've got Glenn Phillips here. Glenn Phillips gets a lot of dot balls, which might be a reason back in New Zealand's favour why they don't want Mitchell and Latham next to each other. Doesn't get a lot of ones. Going to be shocked again, above par on the 2s and 3s. Doesn't hit 4s and just hit 6s. Good on him. Glenn Phillips' strike rate versus pace at the death. Today was at 182, but generally he's been at 167. Kuka! Those are good numbers. And some of his hits today, boundaries in different places. Another reason why I like Glenn Phillips is the ability to hit multiple boundaries in multiple different places. All right. This is really, really fascinating. This is Tom Latham in ODI cricket by his true values. And his main worth, I suppose, to New Zealand is probably between, the 20th and the 40th over in the position that he bats. He has actually kicked on a little bit at the end, and he has a plus 2 strike rate here of 15. But in these particular wickets, right, his main use to the team is coming in earlier. Or when they are in a good situation like they were today, he needs to come in later. So today, when they lost their 3rd wicket, I was like, this is perfect. It's like the 40th over. Phillips will come in, then Bracewell will come in, and then if they stuff up, they've still got Latham to knock the ball around a little bit. But Latham comes out. Previous game, when they lost their 2nd wicket, the spinners are on top, and I was like, this is a perfect time for Latham to come in, play a similar innings than he did against Pakistan. Strike rotate him and Kane for a long period of time, and then when one of them tries to hit out and they go out, you bring in Mitchell and Phillips and Bracewell. But in that game, Mitchell went in. So I think in the last 2 games, Latham is coming in the wrong spot for what he is best at and for what the team is best at. I think you've got to understand how these players work. This number looks good for him at the death, but Glenn Phillips has a raw strike rate of 167 at the death, right? Glenn Phillips is the person you want to come in at the death, right? And when you are having trouble with the spinners and they're completely on top and the pitch has started to turn, you want Latham in, not Mitchell. And I really think that this, especially with Mitchell's recent form, I think they just need to be more flexible with their batting lineup. So I actually think they can get better as a team, New Zealand, by just that. Latham doesn't have to come in at number 5 just because that's what you list him on the score sheet. Oh, there's supposed to be a picture. Did someone forget to put the picture in? Oh, I was going to, one last thing that I was going to bring up before we get to the super chats and everything. Was I thought they did really well in getting out Ryan Rickleton today. I thought he batted very, very well. And it looked like to me he was going to make an absolute bunch of runs and allow for them to smash the ball, to put some pressure, allow for Bavuma to bat slow, I suppose. And they did this really interesting thing. They had this field where they have Phillips a little bit closer at backward point because Phillips can stop balls that other people can't. They then had point all the way back on the rope, which is a very normal thing. And then they had cover back in a little bit, like a cover point, like a catch and cover point. And I remember seeing it and thinking, I've seen them do this before. I understand. But today, that's how they got Ryan Rickleton out. And they're allowed to do it because they're so good at fielding. And it's a huge part of their cricket. But also, I think they read this wicket really well. Rachin Ravindra at the halfway point was talking about the ball slowing occasionally. And I was like, yeah, but it's not going to slow under the lights. It's going to skid through and everything. And they got a wicket from one that slowed really, really early on. So I was really pleased with the way that they went about that. Really clever cricket. Thoroughly professional display from them. All right. Let's take a quick break here, and when we come back, we will go to your questions. I am Jared Kimber. This is the Scoreboard, and see you in a moment. Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favourite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day. It's not the best of cricket. Thank you to their sponsorship and everything, but also worth pointing out that they are covering the WPL really well in a brilliant way. So if you want to go and find any of their content, please head over. But let's get to some comments. Genius Genie says, this game was made and broken by the two openers, Rachin and Bavuma. Not blaming him fully, of course, but South Africa simply fell behind the 8 ball and never got in front once. Plus Santner was incredible. Yeah, so when they didn't lose a lot of wickets early on in South Africa, so I thought this game was always going to break largely on how good New Zealand could be with the new ball. But my idea of how good they could be with the new ball was going to be taking a bunch of wickets. And realistically, they got 1 wicket, and that wasn't even really a new ball kind of wicket, right? And so they got themselves into, but as you said, they got themselves behind in that section, and they never allowed it. Whereas when Williamson went slow, he had someone at the other end. It would be very interesting to see what would have happened if Rickleton hadn't have gone out, because when Rassie comes in, you basically got 2 very similar players. Rassie's big advantage over Bavuma is the power at the end, but very, very similar kinds of starters, right? You know, accumulators, defensive players, you know, playing the percentages, having both of them there. I know it's their plan, but because if one of them gets stuck, it's so hard. And I you know, Rassie played a really good innings today, but there we go. Emmy says, self-proclaimed cricket analyst. Oh, I don't know what this is about. I'm not actually a self-proclaimed cricket analyst. It was my job. I was hired by St. Lucia, Scotland men's team, who else? Melbourne Stars. I did consultancy for a bunch of teams, including RCB. So no, I'm not self-proclaimed. In fact, I don't really like the word analyst. I don't really think it actually explains what the job is. So you're wrong again, as you quite often are. You said that Steve Smith is better than Kane Williamson a few days ago. Another reason for not taking you seriously. Why are you so upset? I mean, just go away. Steve Smith has played very important innings for Australia, and Kane Williamson has played very important innings for Australia. They've also played, in the last couple of days, they've also played a couple of innings that weren't particularly good. All right? And then we see Kane Williamson playing innings that is really good. I just don't understand what your issue is, dude. There's so many other places to go. You don't need to be here. Foxer1 says, 60 in the power play put South Africa in pressure, 30 more was needed. What, 90 in the power play? Is that what he's saying? I'm trying to remember back the full overs. Where are we here? Where are we? I'm not quite sure what he means by that, because both teams scored about 56 runs in the power play, didn't they? 60 in the power play put South Africa in pressure. Yeah, I'm a little bit confused by what you mean by that one, mate. Both teams are kind of slow starters. Rachin Ravindra can crank it up, of course, but both teams are certainly slow starters compared to teams with Travis Head in it, Phil Salt, Rohit Sharma. Like, there's a clear divide, I think, between different tactics from different teams. um, in the way that they go about it. So yeah, from that perspective, you have a situation where they both were always going to do that. The difference here is I actually don't think South Africa's power play was the issue. I think it is. I'm just trying to quickly do the maths in my head here. I think it's more. So they're 56 after the first 10, and then they are 107. So yeah, I thought it was more that period. I think they just got a little bit stuck. And then when they try and ramp up, and this is what happens to them so many times. So they lose a wicket in the 23rd over, the 27th over, the 29th over, and the 33rd, right? They're actually not that far behind where New Zealand was at that point. And we saw that if they'd kept any wickets in hand and a couple of other able batters for David Miller, who knows what they could have done, because exactly what we kind of thought would happen is the New Zealand death bowling just didn't stand up. I mean, I'm not taking it massively seriously, only because the steam was a little bit out of the game. But even so, they don't really have a strong bowling lineup at the death. So yeah, so when we get to the point of getting in that kind of section, it's a little bit different from that point of view. But even so, I think they could have been. So if we look at this, where's the 30 over mark? Sorry, apologies, everyone. If you look at the 30 over mark, they were 181 for 1 New Zealand, and South Africa were 174. So they're 7 runs behind, right? But they're also the extra wickets. And that's what I was going back to before. It's that has been going on with them for a very, very long time. Fox One said, yeah, 90, the same template Australia used and Pakistan did against South Africa. Just gives you a better cushion to chase for next bats. It keeps the run rate in check. Yeah, no, okay, I get your overall point, and I don't disagree with your overall point here. Go back and have a look at how South Africa have been playing for a long period of time and have been successful for a long period of time. They like to keep wickets in hand. They like to knock it around. They, it's funny to me, and it's partly because of how good their 4, 5, 6 have been. Certainly their 5 and 6. That they never get the same level of vitriol that Pakistan has had, right? They actually bat very similar to Pakistan. The difference is Pakistan do it without a work. They don't have Miller and Stubbs and Klaassen, and people like Markram and Rassi can also, if they're still at the crease, they can start hitting 4s and 6s really easily. So that is how South Africa have been playing for ages. They weren't going to chase this down in any unnatural way. They were going to chase it their same way. So I don't think they were going to. You can't really compare a team that has Travis Head and or Rohit Sharma or I said the other one before, Phil Salt type players to a team like this. This is their template, right? The issue today is the Bavuma innings where he gets stuck, and we've seen better players than Bavuma get stuck in this tournament. Kane Williamson and Steve Smith, right? And they are not as limited as Bavuma, right? Like Bavuma is quite clearly nowhere near their level as an overall batting talent, right? So yeah. Varun says, was it a bat first or bat second wicket? Did South Africa really choke? I don't think so. They would never. I mean, in order to choke, you need to be in the game. I'm not sure they were ever in the game. They certainly didn't play very well. So if that's your definition of choking, but they didn't choke as in they were in a position to win the game and then lost it. So the traditional sporting cliche of choke, they weren't even anywhere near. I think it was probably a bat first wicket in the end. As I said, I thought it was a slightly better wicket to bat on in the first innings than the second innings, and you knew that dew was a factor. So perhaps South Africa were wondering if the dew would come in. It didn't. We've seen that in other games, and it has affected this. Like let's say they got to 174 for 4 in the 30th over, and the dew came in. Suddenly, that's a very, very different kind of situation in that game. So yeah, it's very, very different from that point of view. But yes, I think all things considered, it was slightly easier to bat in the first innings and the second innings. But I don't think I don't think that's the reason South Africa lost. Because A, I don't think New Zealand actually got as many runs as they probably could have on that wicket. And B, that South Africa lost so many wickets. That was not a pitch where you should have lost that many wickets, right? They could have realistically maybe chipped it around a little bit longer, although it's not as if all their wickets were from slogging either. So, all right, we'll have another quick break here, and then after break, I'll see if there's any other comments in the room. We will be back on later on in about 3 hours' time for a podcast with Bayram to talk about this game as well. But we'll have a quick break here, and then we'll come back in a moment. I have a book out with Abhishek Mukherjee, and it is called Overthrowing Cricket's Empire. And it's about the stories of how each team beat England for the first time. We go all the way back to the demon Fred Spofforth getting annoyed at W.G. Grace for acting a little bit like Alex Carey. And then we come all the way to present times with Rashid Khan's England's redemption. We cover every single team to beat England in a major international, but we also talk about the incredible stories, like the barefoot basher from Fiji that almost played for New Zealand. In fact, this book is full of tales like that, like how Pakistan lost a top batter after he was on the run from an angry husband of a movie star he was having an affair with, and also how one future captain of his nation realised he might have to go out and bat at Lords and that he didn't own his own pads. Cricket was used as a tool by the Empire, but what happens when those nations grow up and get good at it? Find Overthrowing Cricket's Empire on Amazon today. All right. I don't have that many more questions, actually, so we can fix it up quite quickly. Abhijit says, Bracewell's first 6 overs went for only 29 runs, although there were 2 right-handers there. This is really when they got stuck, isn't it? I thought that New Zealand were clever at that point, though. If I'm remembering back, and it's hard to tell on the TV at times, that's why it's one reason why it's better. I think he was bowling to the long leg side boundary. And so they were putting themselves in a position where there was always a chance if you went for one of those big shots, you might have gone out. Having said that, they went too slow, right? Like they got themselves stuck. They got themselves into a position where they were a little bit behind probably where they wanted to be. And that the 10 to 20 over mark for me was they had lost, 1 wicket. They had 2 set batters at the crease, 2 players who have good records overall. They just had to have done better, and they didn't. Var says, there's a 6'9" Indian version of Jameson and Janssen from Hyderabad called Nishant Sarunu. He bats and bowls. I more got this because of a Jameson. I think he's a really interesting player for New Zealand. And from the moment he's come into the side, I've actually upgraded them quite a bit. And the reason I've upgraded them is before they had Will O'Rourke bowling with the new ball, he had a bit of a shocker today, didn't he? I don't even know what he just felt like to me he was going for runs all the time. His first several balls, he was absolutely all over the shot. What were his figures in the end? Went for 8.6. Jameson went for about the same, but I think his might have come a little bit more at the end. But Will O'Rourke was just struggling to put the ball where he wanted to. But I actually like Will O'Rourke bowling kind of from the 8th over to the 18th over, and then coming back again in the sort of the 30 over period and everything else. So yeah, it's a very, very different kind of situation that allows them, when you have that second new ball bowler, which is why Bolt would have been perfect, right? When you have that second new ball bowler, it really does allow for them to put that squeeze on at the top. And Jameson is a very good new ball bowler. His problems in white ball cricket, are being talked about quite a lot, but he's still an exceptional new ball bowler. And part of the reason was RCB wasn't always using him that way as well. But you put him together with Henry, and he only really needs to just put the ball on the spot, and they have to attack Jameson, quite recklessly at that point, which brings him even more into the game. And then you have the third good seamer coming on in that period afterwards. I just think that suits the way they play cricket so much more. I don't think it had a huge effect on the game today. Probably had a bigger effect in the India game, even if they lost that one. But it's the part of the game that I just think they've upgraded that. And that was one of my big concerns coming in, was I felt they were Henry or bust. And I no longer feel they're Henry or bust. In fact, I know Henry bowled well today and didn't go for a lot of runs. But he certainly wasn't a defining player today, as he has been in some of the other games. But yes, if you can find a 6'9" bowler, I suggest do it. Manu says, wanted to find true values of hundreds today. Sachin era, 100 scored every 0.115th match, compared to the Virat Kohli era, basically every second match. Yeah, and I don't think people really just understand how much it's changed. And especially if you're younger, you just go back and you probably think, oh, you know, they players weren't particularly good. And it wasn't that they were good, it was that the whole genre of the sport was different at that point. And so that's why we're trying to normalize all these different things. I still think it makes Virat Kohli the best 100 scorer of all time. I don't think that changes, right? But what I do think we need to understand is that we certainly have a situation where the game is different. So when you're going back to other numbers, you really need to keep that in mind. Meaning that Virat matches equal to Tendulkar will be about 7,700s. So true value, Sachin, okay, yep. Did not expect Sachin's value to almost double, but he scored hundreds in that era. Yeah, so if you look at, I think it's from about 2010 onwards, which is pretty much in the end of Sachin's career, we just see a huge bump. And really, 2015 is the period where we see it kind of skyrocket. So there's a couple of little law changes. T20 cricket comes in, so people are hitting the ball harder, more naturally, are used to scoring quicker. So you've got those two things, and then you've got what England did, right? So if you think back, the way that the way that South Africa played today that people are complaining about is the way that pretty much every team was playing between 2003 and 2014-ish. And you look at that Indian side when you just had Dhawan, Kohli, and Rohit, like they were just playing within themselves over and over again and getting runs. And teams and teams have changed the way that they've thought about that. The whole thing's gone up. So you had those guys making hundreds in that period, and then on top of that, you then had Owen Morgan and Joe Root type players who were then making hundreds, and you can throw in Bairstow and Roy as well. They're making hundreds because they're not facing as many balls. And now you almost have a combination of those two different methods, right, in modern cricket. So you have a lot of players who can score 100 just because they're going to face roughly 80 to 100 balls. Well, facing 80 to 100 balls in the 1990s, it was pretty unlikely that you were going to make 100. I said this on a recent show. I think it's Jeff Marsh, who I remember batting an entire way through an innings. I'd have to go back and check it. I don't even know if he made what he ended up on, but I remember him being around the 80s, like 86 or 87. And he might have actually got to the 100 right at the last minute, but players quite often would bat all the way through and not make hundreds. Or would bat for 40 overs and not even get close to 100. Like that was a very normal thing. Imagine now an opening batter batting in the 40th over. The wicket would have to be a mess for you not to make your 100. So the game has changed massively in that time. And that's why we're trying to adjust for all these things, right? We're trying to bring them up. All right, I'm in the middle of a coughing fit. I've been holding back, and I'm sure we'll go away the minute I stop recording. But I'll be back in, 2 hours and 40 minutes, and we can continue to chat there. Bayram will be on that one as well. I don't know how the scoreboard will work on Sunday because I'm flying out that day from Boston, and there's a few other things, but we'll definitely have a bunch of other content and everything else. So please check all that out, and we will see you again very soon on this channel and on the other one. Cricket media used to be pretty simple. Find your favorite newspaper, head to Cricinfo, and maybe a blog you'd like. Now just finding the best stories and writing is a huge challenge. You already have a job. You just want to read about cricket. Well, that is what the best of cricket is currently doing. They go out daily to find the newest cricket coverage and the best stories from any publication in the world. And when they can't discover what they want, they also hire some of the best writers to produce their own great stories. You can get the best of cricket via their website or on WhatsApp. They find cricket's best stories and give them to you every day.